Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning. Thank you for being with us today. So, today we're talking about what happens when the thing that's been holding up your confidence disappears. And I wanted to make you this episode because this is sometimes the reason that somebody ends up coming to work with me one on one. So, I would love it if all the people that proactively identify the fact that their confidence is an issue for them at work came to work with me and sorted that out before it ever came to a real crunch point. But you know what us humans are like? Very often, until the crunch, we don't actually do anything about stuff that we know is an underlying issue. So the things that we're going to be thinking about today are external things which are propping up your confidence. And we're going to ask, if they disappeared tomorrow, would your confidence actually remain? And I want you to answer that question for yourself theoretically today, because I know at some point life is eventually going to answer that question for you. So we're going to be talking about those external things that might be propping up your confidence. And I'm really going to be encouraging you to sort it out before life hands you the moment where you're definitely going to have to sort it out. So many highly successful people, you might be one of them, are actually operating from a place of low confidence. They're actually in a low confidence cycle, but they have external factors that are masking it. So let's say you've already taken the confidence assessment. If you haven't, head to the link in the show notes, click it, take the confidence assessment. You're going to find out whether or not you're in a low confidence cycle. But let's say you've already taken it and you are in a low confidence cycle. That has been confirmed. And actually, you know it in your heart too that you are, but you might still be doing well. You might still be performing. You might still be delivering. You might still be meeting your KPIs and your targets, or, getting good performance reviews, and your boss is pleased with your progress and your clients are and your team are. That doesn't mean that you are spared the internal experience of being in a low confidence cycle. So you can have all those things, the success, things are going well, etc. But internally, you can still have constant self-doubt, be overthinking things, comparing yourself to people, feeling like it's not quite good enough. So all the symptoms of a low confidence cycle, like being self-critical, doubting yourself, worrying about decisions, overthinking things, demanding unrealistic standards from yourself, not being able to tolerate a mistake, tending to look at the negatives and ignore the positives and give yourself really harsh feedback. All the symptoms, they are the symptoms of a low confidence cycle, are there and they are operating, but you're managing to be okay because you have external factors which are propping you up. And I want to go through what factors, like protective factors, I think of them as, might be. So maybe you have a really super supportive boss who does do a lot of reassurance and who is willing to listen to all the worries and doubts and kind of be really encouraging and supportive. You might have that. You might have really strong KPIs or strong results, strong delivery, track record. That might be a protective factor. You might be the expert in a particular area. So you might have a lot of technical expertise, and that really, you feel really confident around that. You might be a real top performer. You might be a real star performer. And none of those things are a problem. But what they might be masking is that if one of those things disappears, if we take one of those props away and you need them in order to feel confident, what then happens? Confidence collapses. You end up in a kind of, and I've seen this many times, you end up in a kind of crisis place, a crisis position. So it's like borrowed confidence, if you will. So you might say, I feel confident because my boss always believes in me and supports me and reassures me. Or I feel confident because my numbers are consistently good. Or I feel confident because I'm the expert. But that confidence, it isn't really internal. It isn't coming from the inside. It's relying on those external things in order to prop it up. Then life happens, right? As it always does. Maybe your boss leaves, or maybe you get a new job and your boss is totally different. They just leave you to get on with it and they're not giving you a lot of praise or a lot of encouragement or a lot of support. Maybe the business is going through a difficult time and the KPIs are not what they once were. Maybe you've always been the expert in a particular area, but now you're expected to contribute to more generally as a leader or as somebody else in the business. And that completely sends you into a spiral. Maybe you start a new role or take on something where actually you're the beginner again and you don't have a load of technical expertise. So suddenly, the external support that you were relying on to prop up your confidence disappears. And what gets exposed is what's actually there, but was kind of being masked before. So let's say a supportive boss leaves. What gets exposed is the fact that the self doubt was there, the second guessing was there, the need for reassurance was there, but now it's been exposed. Let's say your KPIs drop or you don't meet a target that you used to always meet or smash. Then what gets exposed is the fear of failure, the fact that your self-worth and your identity is tied to that high performance. When you were the technical expert and then you're being asked to comment more generally, you might have a fear of not knowing, an insecurity around being exposed, right? Not being thought of as capable or competent enough, being thought of as stupid, not being able to do your job. If a strong peer arrives, I've seen this happen quite a few times. If you're doing kind of comparison based confidence, that can collapse. Maybe they're going to be a really strong performer in the team as well. And you're suddenly left thinking, oh my God, what's that going to look like on me? And this kind of moment of confidence collapse is often the point where people come to me. I will always ask, have you had any issues with your confidence in the past? And always for my people who I work with, they will say, well, I have always struggled with my confidence a bit, or there have kind of always been issues there in the background. It's simply that protective factor, that external prop that was keeping your confidence where it was, has been removed. And now we're kind of really seeing the truth of it. We're seeing the underbelly. We're looking at the fact that actually you were operating from a low confidence cycle. So I have this conversation fairly often because people book a call to come and talk to me about confidence coaching when their boss changes or their role changes or they have a performance dip or a promotion setback or they're suddenly being asked to be a general business leader as opposed to someone who just relies on their own technical expertise. What we find out is that this is not completely new, although it looks it. The answer is usually, yeah, I have kind of always struggled with my confidence a bit or in the background. But I've had a boss who reassured me, or I've always had really good KPIs and that's kind of kept me afloat. Or I always had that expertise, that real technical expertise. So I was the expert, or I've always been the star performer. The confidence problem actually wasn't new, but the support system around it disappeared somehow. So what we now know, if this is you, is that you were probably in a low confidence cycle all along. But now something's happened which has exposed the fact, probably made it 10 times worse. So now it's come to a crunch. Maybe you're super anxious or you're not sleeping properly or you're overchecking everything, overthinking everything, worrying. Maybe the cracks have started to show externally. So this might be the crunch point, the moment where you finally think, I can't do this. I've got to make a change. And you can make that change. But that change requires us looking at that low confidence cycle, which was kind of there all along, but was being masked, was being hidden, and doing the work to get you into a high confidence cycle. Because people with genuinely strong confidence, they're still going to appreciate a supportive boss. They're still going to appreciate recognition. They're still going to appreciate getting strong results or good KPIs or, getting a promotion or getting praise from people. They're still going to like all of that. It's great, right? But the difference is that when you're in a high confidence cycle, you don't depend on those things and you don't collapse without them. So when you're in a high confidence cycle, your underlying belief is based on your own capability rather than the conditions that you find yourself in. So you're believing in your high confidence cycle that even if there's a challenge, you can handle it. Even if there's something new to learn, you can learn it. Even if something goes wrong, you can recover. Even if something's tricky, you can figure it out. Even when I'm not getting a lot of external praise or validation, I'm going to assume that it's okay and on I go. And I want you to know the difference because I do not believe that in a long career, you are ever going to be able to mask a low confidence cycle forever, especially not if you're someone who is going to test it by getting promotions, by doing new jobs, new things, taking on new responsibilities. If you sit in the same position for your whole career, yeah, maybe you can get away with being in a low confidence cycle. But if that's not you, if you have ambition, and desire to do things and try things and, push yourself forward and see what you're capable of, you are going to test your confidence. And if you are in a low confidence cycle, but you're relying on those external things to prop you up, at some point, you are going to come a cropper. It is going to come to a crunch point where your confidence, or your lack of confidence, should I say, is revealed. And I feel awful saying this. I don't want to say this to scare you or worry you, but I want to be real. Because I have instances where people come and talk to me. They come and they want to work with me, and they are the most heartbreaking calls that I have. They are situations where, and it's happened a few times, where somebody has the pressure put on them externally because their confidence cracks are starting to show. They're being told, we need you to do it like this. You need to behave this way with clients. We need you to do this. And they are not having the confidence to do that. And all of a sudden, because then the external is not just not propping them up anymore, it's actively coming in and telling them they need to change and do something different. At that point, they go from collapse to just total meltdown. And sometimes when those people come to me, they are literally being told, you need to change this, or like, you're out, it's over, especially if you're more senior. And those are the most heartbreaking calls that I have. And I do not want you to ever end up in that spot. And if you are in a low confidence cycle and you continue to, test yourself by moving up, moving on, doing things, that will continue to get tested. And one day an external prop will disappear. And you may then end up in that position where those people who come to talk to me have ended up where they're in a total state. People have even lost their jobs over it. I don't ever, ever want anyone who's listening to this podcast to be in that situation. I don't want anyone to be in that situation. We need good people in our workplaces doing good work. But that is actually the reality of where this can get to. We don't want that for you. So I want you to think ahead of time, before the crunch point comes. What externally is currently propping up your confidence? And if it disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? Because your confidence is not going to get tested when everything's going well. It's going to get tested when the thing you were leaning on is no longer there. And when it's way easier to solve these problems and sort them out before the crunch point. It's still possible when you come to the crunch point, because it's when many people come and hire me. But if you're to identify this and pick this up early and do the work you need to do to really strengthen your confidence and get into a high confidence cycle. So even if one of those external things like a really great supportive boss or a really strong KPI every month is removed, you can handle that. You can navigate that. You have the internal strength and the internal confidence to think, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm good at what I do. I have the competence and I will continue. That's where we want you. Internally as strong as you can be, so that when the test comes, when the crunch point comes, when the external prop is removed, you're still standing there with your confidence intact. If you want to come and do this work with me, head to the link in the show notes, book a call and come and talk to me about private coaching. The other way that you can work with me is within the Confident at Work program. That's the place where we do the skills work, the foundational work on self-trust, on setting realistic standards, on giving yourself fair feedback, the really strong, key foundational stuff, which is going to give you the internal strength you need so that you can stop relying on those props of the external, which, let's face it, you will not be able to rely on forever, probably. All right, I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confidence. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence, confidence. I can be confident at work.